Wait, what happened?
I think you're good.
Yeah, you're good.
You're good.
We can hear you.
Oh, maybe I clicked. I was trying to do something.
I can still
The without including poverty, we're not going to be resilient. If we're surrounded by people that are just trying to fight to survive within their own house for the next 10 minutes, you know, they're not going to be able to help us be resilient, and they're going to be wasted, as Michael was saying. And I think that when you tie education in and you look how broken our systems are, you know, when I went home from school when I was a kid, as busy as my mom was or as shitty as my babysitter was, I did my homework and they helped me. And they taught me things that my teacher wasn't teaching me. It was built into what we do. And now, you know, you go into a neighborhood like we're at in the Fledge, and we've got so many single parents taking care of their kids because the other parent is in jail or in debt or is dead or is dealing with their own shit over in Detroit or whatever. We've lost this kind of hierarchy of mentorship that starts with that family unit. So we have all these young men running around being mentored by each other, and selling Percocet and carrying guns seems to be the fashionable thing to do in the mentoring world. And then on the flip side of that, we've got our company or our schools who have completely sold our students to the corporations by, you know, telling them to be welders or telling them to get into IT and ignoring their creative sides or the things that they want to do to be happy. And now our whole educational system is just a factory that tries to make things for the factory, and it's taken our lives away.
Yeah.
I think you're again, like this is such an important conversation to have. And I think this is where Katy's expertise could really come in handy here. So if you look at this, again, I'm sharing the screen here. Climate justice, environmental justice, they're kind of different. They're basically synonyms. But the aspect of procedural justice is something that, you know, when we're talking about the criminal justice system and taking voting rights away from, you know, generations of people for nonviolent offenses, this is one of the aspects of kind of justice, environmental justice, social equity that needs to be addressed before you can actually have any degree of resilience in your community. Without that, again, there's too much waste in the system. So I think that could, you know, Katy, if you wanted to say a little bit more on that, but I think that's where kind of your expertise could factor into this in terms of the procedural justice and prison reform and kind of these really important issues.
Is Katy still on the call?
Is Katy on the call?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. But yeah, I'm sure that you guys know, but when it's kind of like I guess like a trigger for me.
Oh, you're really struggling with what's going on.
Well, not yeah, well that, but I was actually like the nonviolent and violent, like nonviolent crime, like is so much so many of them fall into violent crime. Like if you sell drugs and get caught for selling drugs with a gun on you, then you're a violent criminal. So I think like that's really a word that should be used like carefully, because many people that don't know about it, when you say violent crime, they're just thinking of like these people that did horrendous things, when in reality a lot of the people like were just trying to feed their family.
That's why you're,
and of course a drug dealer is going to have a gun.
Right, but that's why your expertise is important, so we can figure out the proper framing and kind of undo some of the stigmas that, you know, some of which are in my blind spots, you know.
Yeah, no, and that's, I guess like that's the main thing that I've been trying to do, like even the little that I have done, just like on Facebook, just posting things and actually responding to people that don't agree with it, because I think that a lot of it I've come to realize is just like lack of knowledge. Like they just don't know. Like people really think that only horrible people are in prison, or like and they don't, and like people don't understand what comes behind being like committing crimes and why people do what they do. And like if we solved those things, then that's how crime would go down. If people didn't have to pick to sell drugs and that wasn't their only choice and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking about it. I want to do something in this. I know other people are doing stuff like just for returning citizens and like that. But my mind hasn't really been clear, I guess. I don't know exactly what I can do yet. But I would like to focus on that area. And if anyone has any ideas, I mean, I definitely love researching that stuff. So
Definitely. And that's why, you know, none of this can happen in isolation. So to even address some of the problems with the procedural justice and representation and recognition, we also need to think about the underlying socioeconomic problems that create crime. You know, like you said, like the people being in desperate situations. And, you know, I mean, there's like ethical thought experiments all the time thinking about, would you steal bread for your family if they were starving? And of course, mostly like everyone would. So it's a matter of poor distribution of resources, you know. So to even address the criminal justice aspects, I think you're absolutely right that you need to address some of the underlying socioeconomic problems that create crime, you know. And that's why you have this kind of I keep going back to this kind of pyramid here, because you need to consider all of these aspects, or, you know, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to be resilient.
right.
I almost see like you could put Maslow's hierarchy of needs over top of it and
Right.
it be like a prism.
I guess I'm thinking a lot about trauma and how that plays into poor outcomes, even when, Jerry, your story about childhood or the neighborhood or my personal experiences with trauma, thinking about both like personal trauma and collective trauma and the criminal justice system and how trauma creates belief systems. So in thinking of a capacity, like I'm not quite sure even what we're like what we're going to come up with in doing this, but I find that everybody has their unique feed of Facebook, which I think I'm like sort of fascinated by reading other people's Facebook feeds. Like I think that would be really interesting as a study, is to sort of see like what cultivated shares happen in any particular person's feed of any social media account, because we've never really been able to sort of see the way people learn before from word of mouth until it's been entombed in writing on the interweb. But I think I can see belief systems underpinning, creating stigma, and in doing resiliency work, needing to find a way to help expand a belief system. Because I think once a belief system is in place, such as, I grew up without, basic needs. I grew up thinking that my only way out is selling drugs or being in a gang, or I grew up with the expectation I was going to college and I didn't get into this amazing college. Therefore, I'm not as good as my other friends that got into this amazing college. Like at every class level, I think there are belief systems that get built. And what I think resiliency would require is being able to step out of the belief system you already have and into someone else's belief system to see how they concluded the way that they got to the decisions that they made or continue to make. And I think in domestic violence or in addictive households with active addiction, that this is another place where you see that, like, that self-sabotaging belief system, like keep people in a place that they know isn't safe, but it's safer than stepping out of a belief system to go into another place where they can believe that there's a way out. And so I just,
So
perhaps interviewing or some way where you get to see, because I think people are just blind to other people's experiences.
Right.
And that's sort of the first, I don't know, for me, I think the first step is trying to find a way to like remove the blindness and say, listen to this person's experience and understand where their belief system is coming from, so that there can be resilience in like collaborative learning to understand where a belief system can switch.
Right. So it seems, if I'm understanding right, I mean, one of our first tasks then would be to almost create, like, how do we cultivate a functional form of empathy? You know, how do we, and I mean, this has been a significant challenge, because I truly believe that there are counter forces in our society that try to deaden us from our own empathy. Because I believe a natural state of human evolutionary trait is empathy. You know, it's why we don't leave our poor, weak babies, you know, in the woods to be eaten by wolves if we were still in the state of nature. But society doesn't reward sticking your neck out. It rewards sticking with the status quo and being self-interested, and as a result, being kind of short-sighted to to the potential that we have if we were kind of collectively working together. So I think that's a really important point to kind of add that to our like big picture matrix, is what tactics could we use to bridge those gaps and kind of create dialogue across demographics. And again, how do you kind of cultivate empathy in a society that, you know, doesn't reward it, which is a huge challenge. I mean, none of these questions have very easy answers, but I think that's why it's so important to have all of you helping us to work on this, because I don't think any one person can possibly have the answer to those questions. But again, I think if we use our collective energies, we could possibly get somewhere. And I think so the first step is also figuring out what other people have done, if there are successful models out there for doing this. I think you're right, like interviews are would be a good starting point, you know, so people can share their experiences. I mean, I think that's why things like StoryCorps are so important. Just giving people the opportunity, even if it's an outlet to talk about their experiences and feel like someone's listening, I think is really, really important. So that could be a part of our like online virtual learning strategy, is you know, having people, creating sessions where people can just talk to one another. I mean, that might be overly simplistic, and you know, we would have to figure out the level of effectiveness something like that would have. But you know, what do you all think about this? Because I think is a really important point.
I think it's super important. I think one thing that's going to be super difficult, I think it's possible, but I feel like a lot of times the more trauma you had, you know, if you're leading one of those lives, if you are in a domestic violence situation, if you were in gangs and are a drug dealer because of how you were raised and things like that, you come from a super secretive place where you don't talk about any of that. And a lot of times even if you know deep down, you don't let your mindset think that you're doing it because of trauma. I mean, I would just say firsthand, just from mine and Jermaine's relationship, like, I'm probably the closest person to him, and I even don't know a lot about his childhood. Like, I've been with him 3 years and learned bits and pieces, but it's not something, it's I guess it's difficult to get people to talk about. And then I would just, also another example of why I think it's difficult is like Jerry, when we held the Pizza in Progress thing for parolees and people on probation, so that we could get their stories and their feedback on an app that we're creating to help them. And literally no one showed up. And, you know, I mean, you know, like, you would think, like, these are people that don't have very much money. We're feeding them pizza, like, and we're trying, but they're so scared that everything's a setup. Like, okay, well, a lot of things have been a setup. So what are you really going to do with this information? No one really has cared. So why do you, like, there has to be some has to be coming from a bad place. You want me to say this information and tell you this so that you can do something bad to me. So I think it's just really hard to get people that have severe trauma and are living these lifestyles to talk about it. I know some people do after they've lived it, but I don't know if anyone does while they're living it.
It's an issue of trust.
I think that
Mhm.
the same situation happen and the same things happening in like international development, right? So as an aid worker abroad, as a white woman, like I'm going in and saying like, hey, what do you know, we've really changed in the last like 2 decades the way that we think about international development. So when we're going there, we don't say, here's the way I think you should do it. Where we began to now realize like that doesn't work in the long term. That's unsustainable. So we like go out to them and see like, what do you need? How can we help you? What is that, Jerry?
Ernie just dropped out.
I knew it wasn't gonna be good for him.
Well, we'll circle back to Bernie in a second. So, we get the same type of hostility. I mean, aid workers have been like attacked and killed for trying what is like, in all intents and purposes, like trying to do something that's good for the community. But at the same time, like the experience there and that trust factor, like we've ruined the trust with those communities because for decades we tried to force them into a box that didn't fit them culturally. We were insensitive to their actual needs and their feedback. And then when, you know, it didn't work out and they decided like, oh, I'd rather use this money on something that I think is beneficial to me personally, we said, okay, well then we're never going to help you again because you didn't do it the way that we wanted you to do it. And so I think that there's a lot of shared like history and discussions in like colonialization studies and critical theory studies that talk about like, you know, being reflexive about it. And that's why I think we need to find key players from those communities who are willing to like interact with them.
Right.
And we take a back seat to that.
Right, because Kate, I think you mentioned that from the very beginning. You know, we have a panel of all white faces here, and you know, it's like this kind of whole thing. It's like, you know, we're developing the world. You know, people see it. You know, it's the white man's burden type of thing. You know, and there's a lot of paternalism there. There's a lot of history there. A lot of injustice that is perpetuated through those systems. So, you know, many people would rightfully ask, like, how is this going to be any different from, you know, a history of white people trying to, you know, change the world as they see, you know, is their conceptualization of a better world. So I think, you know, Charla's right in terms of there's demographic barriers that need to be acknowledged. And we won't always be able to be the ones to bridge those gaps because Katy brings up a really good point about, you know, the aspect of trust. You know, and sometimes that trust can't even be built even within members of the same community because there are value systems that prevent that level of intimacy and openness. I mean, I'm a Bostonian. It's a lot of Irish Catholics who do not like to talk about their feelings. So I come from a place where it's also difficult for people to open up and actually share their feelings. So as a result, there's a lot of this hyper masculinity and bravado that really is just posturing and it doesn't get us closer to understanding each other. So on some levels, I don't think some of these barriers can be surmounted or not very easily. But it is something that we have to think about in terms of how do we build trust, how do we build empathy, and how do we reach out to communities beyond our own to again, utilize every quarter of our society, every quarter of our community, so there is no waste. We're all working towards a common goal. And that's resilience, as I see it.
I think I got to go fairly quickly here. I think that a couple of things, Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, especially in the area of emotional bank accounts and seeking first to understand before being understood. There's a lot of good work that he did in that area. You can't have a white guy tell these young Black kids in this neighborhood about all this, you know, American dream and great opportunity. They heard all that shit before. They got to hear it from themselves. They got to believe it. They've got to see true examples of it. And I do think you guys nailed it in the beginning. We got to get less white. I go by ethnically ambiguous, by the way. I never said I was white.
Me too.
I was making an assumption.
And I love this. I think this is a great initiative that OT is doing here. This is very, very good. One other quick thing. Watch Poverty Inc. Watch Poverty Inc. Watch Poverty Inc.
Put it on the board.
What is that on, Jerry? Is that on Netflix?
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing before you take off, Jerry. I would like to have these sessions weekly. I would like to create a framework for engagement for people in different communities around Lansing who can come and take part in these discussions and building this proposal. And so I wanted permission from the core team to record all of our meetings and put them up on YouTube, and to also make our meetings completely public and viewable by anyone. I don't know why, but every time I propose this like full transparency in any organization that I've worked with or had like started, everyone's like, no.
People's buttholes
Like
clamp up.
up because of it.
Not us, man. Our buttholes are ready to go.
So like, I want to make sure everybody feels comfortable with that, because I think that that's going to build something really beautiful and trust. Because I don't want to be making decisions like behind closed doors when it involves everyone in the community. Like, it's very important for me to like do this right, because I think we have an opportunity here through this like chaos and destruction to build something really beautiful. And it makes me think of like the phoenix rising from the ashes type situation. So I know you got to go, Jerry, but we're going to talk about like some hardline roles and what people feel comfortable with doing. And then I'd also I want to talk about like preliminary budgets, because I'd like to reinvest some of OT's money that we're about to get into this so that we can pay you guys like something. And I know like it might not be exactly as much we need to all live, but I at least want to provide some sort of monetary like to your guys' work, because it's really important to me. And I don't want you guys to be putting all this emotional labor into something and not feel valued.
And I hope you do feel valued just by virtue of, of being here, because we do. Every person, I think, should be at the core of this. Every person has intrinsic value. And it's hugely important. And I just wanted to say too, I really like the idea of making this transparent and posting our stuff online, because someone might come across it and they initially might not think they have anything to contribute to this type of conversation, but then they watch and see what happens, and they realize, aha, they have the contrast space to be able to figure out, like, no, I actually do have a view to contribute here. And I think that will, only help in terms of making this movement, this kind of energy much larger. So I think that's really important if everybody is okay with doing that.
I'm 100% okay with the transparency. I think it's fantastic. I think it's important. I think it will build trust. And I think we should stay pure to it starting right now and moving forward. And I'm sorry, but if someone doesn't like it, maybe they're not the right person to be in the group right now. They can join us later. Yeah. And then I'm going to sign off, but The Abundant Community by Peter Block and John McKinley describes the gifts that people bring to the table. So everybody's got a crazy ass Aunt Betty that shows up at Thanksgiving and gets drunk and, has Tourette's or whatever, but she's funny as shit and she adds a ton of value to the family in just the entertainment value alone. So everybody who shows up at the Fledge, who'd have thought that Emily was going to be out there, handing out tools to help people create a life-saving thing when she showed up in her furry, doing cosplay. Who'd have thought how critical she would be?
Yeah.
And I can say that about all of you.
We appreciate that, Jerry. Do we want to agree on a general meeting time to do this weekly? does this time work for everyone? You know, at least until this whole thing is over. I know everybody will probably have to go back to their 9-to-5s or whatever. But for the foreseeable future, does this work?
It works for me, and I'm in.
Yes, it works for me too.
This actually could turn out to be my most important meeting of the week, if we keep this moving right. So I'll make it happen no matter what you guys need to do.
And Jerry, continue to reach out to people because, you know, you have a substantial network of people who are trying to do good things. So, you know, just keep inviting people and we'll, you know, see where this goes.
All right. You want me to get some people on here?
Yeah, more and more
Okay.
than I was interested in doing stuff, you know, not just people who are like here to critique everything that's happening. Like we're looking for allies that are like actually interested in taking action, just to like throw that out there.
I mean, it's okay to point out barriers and what we would need to consider to make this like actually successful and not just kind of a pie in the sky idea, but not someone who's going to completely be an obstructionist.
Well, on the 18th, we're having a meeting that's more like that, like where everyone can come and provide critiques and feedback. Like I want to encourage those every 2 weeks, but our weekly meeting should be like actionable items. And like you're gonna leave now, but we're gonna have a set of actionable items leaving this space before everyone leaves.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in.
If I have actions, let me know, but I'll recruit. I know that for sure.
One of us is going to sit down with you and do a recorded interview to like pick your brain about these abundance theories so that we can build a framework for the proposal.
And we'll post the resources that you mentioned as well in the
meeting minutes so that other people can find them too.
All right.
All right.
Love you guys.
Thanks,
See y'all.
Jerry.
Love you too. See ya.
Take care, Jerry.
See ya.
Bye.
So what do you guys think about this project and how involved do you want to be? Because it's on you, and if you don't want to be involved because you're busy or you know you're feeling like you need to put your time somewhere else, like there's no shame at all. But I would like to give you the opportunity to be a part of it if you want.
I feel hesitant to commit blindly right now. I think if there was some sort of specific, I mean, that I thought of this meeting today as sort of like a brainstorming session, and just seeing where everybody's at on this. I'm still not even like sure what the project exactly is or will become. So I feel hesitant to sort of blanket commit, and then having experienced sort of my own personal trauma in collective activism and finding it is bringing up a lot of anxiety in me to have the meetings recorded and be out there very publicly with my opinions. And I feel comfortable and safe with all of you. And I feel like I've found a group of people who've welcomed me and accepted me, but maybe we can, talk about this offline, Charla, or something. And maybe it's really healing and good for me to be in a very public forum. But anyway, I'm hesitant to like blanket commit, but I definitely will plan to come to meetings. And once something gets sort of specified, but I'm in a very financially unstable spot in my own personal life right now. So my priority, unlike the last 15 years of my life, is to put my family first and not my community first, because I need to do that right now. So, and I feel like guilty about that.
It's that's totally legitimate.
Valid thing.
And there's no pressure about this. And I will just say, for the record, you've said nothing but lovely things, and any conversation, it's all, beautiful stuff. I think most of us are idealists at heart. But we're also pragmatists. We have experience organizing and kind of doing these type of things. We all know the annoyances of the politics that can be involved in community organizing, so that's why I'm not a huge fan of kind of creating like core hierarchies, core groups. I would like to make it as expansive as possible, but obviously not diluting the ability to make actionable items. but it's whatever you're comfortable with. And even if you just want to come here to brainstorm with us, that is a contribution in and of itself, being a professional brainstormer. Like
There's my title.
Exactly. That's still really valuable and helpful to us. And it shows that you care. And, all of that stuff is great. So I just, wanted to say that.
Thanks, Mike.
Before we go further, maybe I could help clarify with like some specific actionable items that I see that can be done. Because like right now the curriculum is slightly vague, and I'm used to working in this space because I specifically focus on participatory action research, which means that you go in with like no real research agenda, and you ask strategic questions about what other people want to talk about and what other people want to do. So at first it feels really scary and like you're almost like in a free fall, like what does any of this really mean? So kind of like what I'm seeing from these conversations is that we have like a lot of different ideas that are going to be super helpful. Definitely we need somebody to like be a point of contact for people interested in, joining the organization or contributing in some way. I don't mind being that person.
Did you want me to do that?
Well, or Michael could do it, but I wanted to see how other people felt about it, and I don't want to just be like, Michael, you have to do this, even though he's my partner. I want to give him that and other people opportunity to take on that position. I really see like we need somebody who's going to be able to help search for a grant, and I know that me and Jeff have a meeting after this specifically talking about grants related to OT's program. So I kind of tentatively put your name there, Jeff, even though you haven't agreed to it yet, so no pressure.
Being voluntold, I know how it goes.
Best way to do it.
I just feel like also like you have experience going after grants. You like know where to look for grants. And I know that like right now you really need that support too. So if we can secure any grants, even not involving this, but some of the other projects,
Fold in that work.
then we can fold that into the entire network. And then I also see like multiple people working on a written proposal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to put in there like a place for grants, prospective grants to be put, a spreadsheet for key players. And this is kind of what I think like we could all contribute to for sure, but I think some people know key players more than others. So like Jerry, for instance, and Kate, you know a lot of key players in Michigan, and maybe you could contribute just by throwing their names in there. And then like whoever is doing outreach can reach out to them and say like, hey, we have this idea, but I would prefer to have like a rough proposal, like either like a 2 to 3 page proposal to show someone in written form before we start reaching out to key players, because I think it can be, they're probably being reached, a lot of people are reaching out to them right now, and a lot of them probably don't have a lot of concrete written plans. They just have all these big ideas. And I don't want to be just another big idea. I want them to see that we've actually put a lot of intentional thought into what we're doing. And we actually have a game plan, like a roadmap.
I think we should also have a like just basically a resource page, and that doesn't need to be a specific role, but these meetings seem to be producing a lot in the way of resources that could be helpful for folks, both within this group and outside of the group. So I think having a repository for some of that information would be helpful.
And then I see like because I would like to start soliciting curriculum for a more resilient community. So we have about 600 manuals on different aspects of like survival, of human survival. So like gardening and canning and butchering and like all of these different things. And so I would like to create like a curriculum of points that we would like to solicit people who have those technical skills. And then what we would probably do is we would either have them just write out what they usually do and maybe do some audio recording or interviewing them over Zoom and compiling that and putting that into a course on the app. And since Katie's going to be kind of, and we're really pushing, I'm going to find like you, so this can be your full-time job if you want it. is to help with the content management and like outreach and admin stuff. And hopefully like we could try to get you paid more than what you're making at the church is the goal. But obviously you have that job too, so like no pressure to like have to be doing all of that, because I'm also helping on that too. And once the check clears for this grant for the Michigan network, like we'll have money to reinvest in hours, and we pay a minimum $15 an hour. And so like any work that you guys would do, even if it's just five hours a week, like I'm gonna pay you for that work, because you guys are on the OT team. So, and then we need people doing research, which all that can be compiled into this like resource document that other people can use whenever they want, because we need to make sure that we're like, for one, not just remaking the wheel. I don't, if somebody else is already doing something, then we should be using that as our framework. But I think Jerry has like a really special way of understanding and being able to relay like this framework of resiliency and abundance that I think we should really tune into. So this is going to be like an Organizing Together at the Fledge initiative. The Fledge and OT has a formal partnership. We're in the middle of signing contracts. So this is going to be a program underneath both organizations. And so if you find yourself interested in contributing to any of those roles, they don't necessarily need to be only your roles. We can have like 4 or 5 people doing all these different things at once.
Right, and I necessarily think it needs to be decided at this meeting.
At this meeting either.
You know, it's something you can think on, and, you know, again, just do a little bit of homework on your own, and then you might be able to think of how and, you know, in what capacity and to what extent you want to contribute to this group. But again, there's really no pressure to do that. You know, it doesn't need to be as formal as that. Kate, you know, just to answer your question again, I think we're doing multiple things here. You know, I think our main goals is to like build an actual curriculum on the OT app. But we also want to, you know, have both kind of the theoretical, conceptual education part of this, but also have kind of the real world value to it. And I think that's actually how we build out in the real world. I think that's kind of like the 2-pronged approach of what we're trying to do here generally.
Who's the target recipient of the curriculum? Like, who do you envision being, like, accessing the literature and the lectures and, like, utilizing them?
So obviously right now it would only be people who have the internet.
Mm-hmm.
What we would like to do is, once the pandemic is finished, to expand this to in-person courses at the Fledge.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we would be able to open it up to the more general public. I think once the pandemic's over, I would like to see if we can get, like, I would really be having both like curriculum for kids and a curriculum for adults.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, like you said, especially even right now, like there isn't a lot of options for like learning public education. But to me, like, what does that mean to be publicly educated, right? Because these kids are leaving school without understanding, what temperature do you need to boil water so that the water doesn't kill you?
How you balance your checkbook.
How do you
sweep the floor when I graduated high school? So
how do you start your own business? And those are things that were already being done at the Fledge, and you know, Shannon was already doing that program at her school.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that like there's multiple target audiences. Obviously we're very limited right now, but we could have one specifically for adults and specifically for kids, and then try to say like, hey, you can do this with your kids. Like these are really easy to navigate. I really think that an elementary school kid could go through and click the next button on every course and interact with it. And it could be something that would be helpful for all these people right now who are so worried about like, what is my kid going to learn? I would love to have my kid be learning about gardening right now. You know, skills that are actually like, what if shit hits the fan and there is no more public education?
Mm-hmm.
like put Adam out in the yard to do yard work. I mean, he's not very good at it right now, but we just put him out there.
He usually just cries.
He'll learn.
He's scared of the outside. He like just.
Needs to build resilience.
But we're definitely interested in like supporting both of those things. And like I said, this is going to be like one really wide proposal, and then we're going to section them off into probably smaller proposals and find grants that are specifically focused on that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because it all seems a bit unwieldy, but I think that if we can find the right interested donor, they would actually value the fact that we're looking at this much more holistically.
And that's what these sessions will produce, is a little bit more in the way of organizing our thoughts and kind of, you know, creating smaller bite-sized pieces that are actually achievable instead of just kind of pie in the sky ideas. But I think that will take a couple of sessions, you know, and that's why I hesitate to kind of dole out any roles right now, because we are primarily just in a brainstorming session. On the board here at the top, you know, the mission is basically how do we build resilience in the community? And again, from an educational standpoint, and again, thinking about some of the barriers to education and how we can make that as accessible as possible. And then, you know, focusing on grants so we can actually actualize some of what we're doing out into the real world, and strengthen some of the already existing networks that exist in the Lansing area, and maybe serve as a model for the rest of the country, you know? So it really depends on where we kind of take this from here. But I think there's a lot of different ways we can go, and a lot of potential in the group, as Jerry pointed out.
No, I think we have the tools and the people. It's just a matter of going out and getting it.
Do you know if there are any other urban farming or urban gardening associations through either Michigan State University or Lansing, or the greater Lansing area?
I think it's the land bank. I think that they're the main one, and I can reach out to John and see, because obviously they're going to have a contact list of all the other ones. So I think that like we need to like identify like various, like, so like there's environmental groups, right? There's companies that are already working on sustainability. We need to create, like, have a typology to like understanding where we should be looking for key players, right? And I think like having a list of all the community centers as well, because every community center in Lansing is different and they have a different relationship and demographic makeup. And so it would be great if we could also bring in some of the other community centers and say like, hey, we have this curriculum we would like to share with you. Would you like to share this with your members? Would you like to give us feedback? Would you like to be involved? And they can kind of do what makes them feel comfortable, but I want to really like invite everyone to contribute. Because it is about building that trust and building that identity of community. That can only happen if people are able to participate. And so by like recording these meetings and like offering them on YouTube, like if somebody missed it because they have their kids all day and they can't participate, or they're essential workers and they're working out of their house, like I still want them to be able to understand like what we talked about, provide feedback, comment on our YouTube page, and then we can kind of take that into consideration going forward. So it's one way we can do that. And what's nice about the platform too is that they're living libraries, right? So if other people have other resources they want to commit on the topic, they can just add them to the course. And they're there for everyone to use. And so I want to encourage people to like make these courses their own. And I want to get a wide variety of people working on different courses. And so we just nearly finished. There's some video work that I want to put into the course, but we finished our meta course class to teach people how to like sign up to create a course, how to set up the course, what all the features are to make the course. And now we can start reaching out via social media, via the network, and say, these are the aspects of, so like there's a few of them. We have like resilient community discussion. We have like business development, right? We have nonprofit development. I would like to solicit people to kind of put classes up there. And right now, as the pandemic's happening, all the classes are free. And I'd like to keep it that way until we get through this and reassess what's going on, because my goal is just to help as many people as possible. The platform's paid for, so I'm not really in a position where I need money off that platform right now. So later, after that, then people can sell their class for $10 per person and be able to make money off of it. But in the immediate future, until we're actually allowed to start going back to work and things like that, I would like to open it up so people can have it just as a place to learn.
I would also like to, because everybody's time is valuable, for future meetings, we can kind of confine this to an hour, unless people want to continue it further. But just, because sometimes an obstacle to doing these things is these can be 3-hour meetings, and I don't necessarily find that to be a productive way of doing this. That's just my own personal experience kind of weighing in there. So I would like to, again, have a set time, if it's Wednesdays, 10:30, it will be an hour long. And by 11:30 we're out, and we'll all have kind of an idea of what we can be doing for the week, so like I said, I think it will take a few more sessions to get us there. But I think, I think this is good for a start. Yeah.
And I'm used to facilitating online groups like this. So I will make sure, as the facilitator, that we're moving along. Because it can become quite frustrating for people when they come and it doesn't feel like it's a space where we're actually being productive, but just kind of a space of talking.
Yeah. We don't want it to be a talk shop. We actually want to kind of get things done. So. But thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you will come to the next meeting. We'll continue sending out links, so you can make that decision on your own without any pressure. Yeah.
I personally am going to start on writing the curriculum and kind of outlining that so we can start doing outreach.
Right.
Because no matter what happens with this proposal, that's something that we're just going to be doing. And then I'll add that curriculum to these meeting minutes, so that people can provide feedback if they want. And then I'll do some of the design and send that out and start soliciting instructors.
Does anyone have anything to add before we break?
Just thank you.
Thank you. And obviously I can help with outreach. If we just have something general to base off kind of what I would say, then yeah.
I'm happy to see that position if you want to kind of be the outreach coordinator once we get to that spot, and you reach out to those organizations. I'm happy. My contribution is largely research, because this is what I focus on anyways. So if you would like to do that, you seem to be very good at making the phone calls and making these relationships. So in a way that I could only dream of doing.
Thanks, Michael.
If you want to do that, just speak out. None of these roles are written in stone, and if there's something that we've missed that you think you'd be able to contribute in a different dimension, then just let us know.
And if you need to stop at any point, your name's still going on the proposal, you're still gonna get credit. This is a part of your work, and everybody is gonna be front and center. Yeah. So
and
don't
again,
ever
unless
feel bad about dropping out.
Right.
Unless you don't want it.
Unless you don't want to, right? Wielding, but as focused as possible. It's a tough line to toe. So.
But yeah, I think Katie, I'll send you an email. Oh, I'll talk to you after this because I have other things to talk about. But I'll send you an email. I'll add you to our Facebook page, and I'll add you to our MailChimp and give you that information too. And then I'll put together how all of the outreach information. And then we'll just kind of strategize on how, you can help with that. And please let me know once you've hit that hour that you already got paid for. And then I'll send you another sum of money. We can talk about that.
Okay. Cool.
All right.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Thanks everybody. It was good to see you.
Thank you.
You
We'll
too.
see y'all soon.
Did you still want to meet at 1 o'clock, Charla? Okay.
All right. See you then.